This is where Kansas' most interesting people come to talk about their lives, their loves, and the lessons they've learned along the way. This week, my guest is a true native son of the air capital. If it has wings, Captain Doug Moeller can fly it. He has flown everything from the smallest single-engine plane to giant 747s. From the time of his first airplane ride at age 15, Moeller has been hooked on aviation. He became a pilot in his early 20s and went on to become a flight instructor. In 1972, he was hired to train pilots at Beechcraft in Houston, Texas. Within a few years, he was flying jetliners and working for Frontier and then Continental Airlines, where he worked for 20 years as a pilot. Moeller flew thousands of hours carrying passengers to and from Europe, the South Pacific, and South America. Then, to his disappointment, the FAA policy forced him to retire at age 60. Now Moeller lives on the grass airstrip at High Point Air Park near Valley Center. He owns and flies 6 airplanes and is well known throughout the American aviation community. Moeller hosts several fly-ins each year, reuniting with pilot friends from across the nation. Coming up, we'll find out what drives his passion for flight. We'll hear about some of his exciting experiences piloting aircraft around the world, and we'll get his take on the future of aviation in these days when young people seem more interested in playing video games than actually flying real airplanes. This should be an interesting half hour as I go one-on-one with Captain Doug Moeller. Hello and thanks for joining us. I'm Victor Hogstrom, and it's a pleasure to welcome acclaimed aviator Captain Doug Moeller to the program. Captain, it's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here, sir.
Now you are what is described as a true native son of the air capital. How did that name have a bearing on your career?
Well, I was born and raised right here in Wichita, and was one of these kids that had a love for airplanes, and to the point to where people thought I was crazy. I'd run outside every time one flew over just to see what it was, and always begged my mom or dad to take me to any air show that was around. Even used to ride my bicycle out to the Air Force Base and watch airplanes. I'd park my bicycle not too far off the end of the runway and sit there all day long watching airplanes go, shoot landings and stuff. And I did that so many times I couldn't mention it, but I went to East High School, was an East High ace, blue ace,
Mm-hmm.
And that was our mascot, was like a little airplane. So what kind of a deal is that? And I just grew up with aviation on my mind, and going to airplane movies and learning all I could learn about airplanes, reading magazines and things.
But why? Why did you grow up with airplanes on your mind? What prompted that? Something must have created such interest in you.
Well, it's hard to pinpoint it. I had an older brother that used to fly a lot of model airplanes and things, and I followed him around like a little puppy dog. But I just always had this real interest in aviation and airplanes. And it's, some people do and some people don't. It would baffle me to meet somebody that didn't really have a desire to fly or love of airplanes, but that was my main interest when I was growing up, was aviation.
Mm-hmm. So you graduated from high school, and what was the next step?
Well, I spent some time at Wichita State, never did graduate. I went to school over there twice, but I eventually went to a flight school at the municipal airport and took flying lessons and learned how to fly. And I was 21 years old at the time, something I should have done when I was 16 or 17 years old. And but it's just a matter of the availability of the funds and stuff like that.
But you took your first airplane flight at 15.
At 15, I took my first airplane ride in a Cessna 172, and I was awestruck to sit there in that airplane and look out the window and, whoa, this is way cool, and actually got to hold the controls a little bit, and that was it. I was really hooked in.
So what was the feeling like that very first time when you're flying? What conclusions did you reach for your own self and your future?
Well, it was a culmination of a lot of different thoughts and things that went into it, and of course being in the air flying was like being a bird and like having a freedom that I've never enjoyed before. Aviation is one of the last true real freedoms we have in this planet, and it was absolutely fabulous. And that airplane ride drove me to then learn how to fly myself and pursue a career in aviation.
And so you got the career, you flew professionally throughout your life, lived off your career, making money as a pilot for Continental, was one of the main places you worked, 20 years. What was it like working for Continental? That is today United.
Yeah, it was absolutely like a gift from God. I got to do what I really love doing and get paid well for it. There was a lot of stepping stones to get to that point. You don't just learn how to fly and go to work for an airline. I did a lot of flight instructing and charter flying, and even flew for Shell Oil Company for 10 years, and building time and getting ratings to where I could be successful in an interview with the airline.
Prior to flying jets, you've flown all kinds of planes, many types, but prior to flying jets, you flew a lot of the smaller ones. Compare for us the difference between flying a huge jetliner versus a prop or a corporate jet.
Well, I've flown everything, like you say, from ultralights. I own 2 ultralights, and they're really light. The maximum weight's 254 pounds, to 747s, and we'd be close to 800,000 pounds on takeoff sometimes. But the airplanes, a lot of things work very, very similar, except on a big heavy airplane like a airline equipment or a heavy corporate jet. But the airline equipment's even heavier than that. The airplanes tend to be a little smoother and a little more precise, and they take turbulence a little better and winds and things. But the little airplanes, I learned how to fly in a Cessna 150, which is, I bet you if you took all of the pilots in the city of Wichita and say, tell us what airplane you learned how to fly in, I would say 90% of them would say Cessna 150.
And
they made those things.
You went from there to, what was the next step after that?
Oh, just flying Cessna 172, Beechcraft, Bonanzas, and different little light airplanes, but more of a heavier airplane going on up. One more thing about the 150. I remember back in the, I think it was the late 60s, maybe the early 70s, Cessna was making the 150s down at Strother Field, down by our Kansas City. One every 13 minutes.
Wow.
That's turning out airplanes.
Yep.
So, no, I just went from the 150 to the bigger airplanes. I ended up selling my 150, and I bought what's called a Luscombe, which is about the size of a 150, but it's a tailwheel airplane.
Right.
And
now, currently, you live in Valley Center.
live in Valley Center.
On your own airstrip.
Yeah, I live on High Point Air Park. It's a flying community. It's really a nice little one. There's a lot of flying communities around, but High Point has been there since the early 60s, so we have a lot of mature trees, and people's houses are real nice. Some of these flying communities that you see are a big field with rural houses and a runway, but it's nice to have a more mature neighborhood and all that. High Point's really nice. It's always been very well kept, and it's a very nice community. A lot of good people out there. We all kind of take care of each other.
And you own how many planes right now?
6.
Why 6?
You can never have too many airplanes.
What do you do with 6 airplanes?
Well, I don't know.
Is there one for every day, except Sunday?
Well, I don't get to fly them all very often, but I fly them all occasionally, and it's just kind of like anything else. Some people like to collect cars. I like to collect airplanes. I don't know. Maybe I'm just kind of an airplane hoarder. You know what I mean? My hangar, for example, at home is lined with photographs of airplanes and airplane paraphernalia, propellers hanging from the wall, and models hanging from the ceiling, and I've got a great collection of old antique airplane instruments and stuff like that.
Now, you've flown the small planes and the jets. Have you had any mishaps, come close to a crash or any such thing?
Oh no, I've never really had a bad problem at all. When I was with the airline, one time on the 747, we ended up shutting one of the engines down, and it wasn't really an engine failure. It was a failure of the generator, and the book said that as we follow the procedure for shutting the generator down, you're supposed to disconnect the generator from its what we call a constant speed drive. It's kind of a transmission that drives the generator at a specific speed, so it would develop 400 cycles, 400 hertz and 115 volts. Well, it said if you can't reset the generator, disconnect it from the CSD, constant speed drive. And the airplane had just come out of maintenance, heavy check, and they went through everything, but the CSD on that engine would not disconnect. And it was actually in the logbook that it wouldn't disconnect. So following the procedure, we had to, if you couldn't disconnect the generator, shut the engine down, because it didn't really know what was the matter with the generator, why it quit working. And if it was out there turning, it might destroy itself. So they said, okay, shut it down. So we had to shut that engine down. But in an airplane the size of a 747 with 4 engines, if you shut one of them down, nobody knows it in the back. Right. The airplane just keeps on keeping on. So
you've described your work with Continental as not in exact quotes, but a godsend. That's what you're looking for. Do you have any memorable moments that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I have some that I wouldn't like to share with you. But just flying into Australia and New Zealand and getting to to go to different parts of the world: Paris, England, London, or Paris, France, and London, England, and the different locations around the world, and flying the airplanes into Alaska, all the way down into South America. It was without a doubt the best job in the world. I don't care if you're a lawyer, a doctor, what you are. Ain't nothing like being an airline pilot. I mean, that's kind of crudely said, but that's true. An airline career, a pilot with the airline is I think it's the best thing in the world. And Continental had the cleanest, finest airplanes. I swear I've seen them all, you guys. Our airplanes were maintained meticulously. And there was very seldom did we have any maintenance issues at all. And the company took great care of us, put us up in fabulous hotels on layovers, and paid us well, and anything you wanted, you got. It was just a fabulous job.
So with the coming of drones and all of the development, there's talk about air taxis, self-serving flying airplanes. Would that not affect the future of aviation in America?
I've got my own feelings about some of this air taxi nonsense. Some of these things I've seen, they've got a lot of little propellers out here, you know what I mean? You've seen some of them. And I'm not going to put my body in one of those things. I've got a rating in a helicopter. I'm a helicopter rated pilot. And in a normal real live helicopter, if the engine quits, you can auto rotate and flare and make a smooth landing. If one of these silly little motors out here quits, you become a lawn dart. You're not going to auto rotate something that has helicopter blades 3 feet, propeller blades 3 feet across to a little electric motor. No.
What about drones?
Well, little drones have their place.
Well, you have the large drones too, the military ones, for instance.
Well, yeah, if you want to talk about the big drones that fly over and launch missiles and stuff like that, they
could become passenger planes one day, couldn't they?
I don't think you're going to see that. I think you may one day see freighters that would be remote controlled, whatever, computer controlled, but not carrying passengers. I would be very leery to put my body on something that had little microchips and stuff, and you're going to rely on this thing working. It's just, I don't see there's a big future for drones, and not in my lifetime. They'll keep making real airplanes like 787s and 777s and 737s. It's going to be that way for a long time. Now they've managed to cut airline crew size down. When I started flying for the airline, everything had a 3-man cockpit. We had a captain, a first officer, and a flight engineer. Flight engineer had a big panel back there. He's taking care of the electrical system, hydraulics, pneumatics, air conditioning, pressurization, and all that stuff. And he was staying pretty busy.
So you're saying there will always be a need for pilots and engineers on the plane?
Yeah, not flight engineers. Boeing and Airbus and any other airframe manufacturer now has managed to automate a lot of these subsystems and eliminate the need for a flight engineer.
So why wouldn't the need for pilots be eliminated?
Because when you're flying an airplane and you've got your hands on the controls, whatever, and you've got to continually make decisions based upon the winds, the weather, the destination airport weather and condition, and alternate airports and stuff. It's just not the kind of thing you can stick a bunch of electronics in there to do for you.
Okay, so share with us your aviation activities nowadays. What do you do? Because you retired at age 60.
I retired
that
at
was
age
a while
60.
ago, and you still had it in you. You still have it in you too. So what do you do?
Well, after I retired, like I say, I flew a corporate jet for an outfit here in town, caller time, matter of fact, and I did that for 10 years. And since then, I have flown some other aircraft and different things that have come along. I helped take a 747 down to Bolivia that a freight company bought, and they needed to have it moved down there. And I belong to a lot of different aviation organizations, the Experimental Aircraft Association, the Commemorative Air Force, and I used to volunteer out at the Air Museum. I may go back to doing that. I worked on dock, the beautiful B-29, for 6 years. What a gorgeous airplane. And so I've kept myself pretty busy in what's going on in aviation. I belong to the Wichita Aero Club, and there's just a lot going on.
Young people today, Captain, don't seem to be very interested in being pilots. Why is that?
Well, there's not the real drive to do that as there was, and I'm not real sure that you can pinpoint it to any one particular thing. The FAA has made it much more difficult to get the ratings and time required to qualify to be hired at an airline. It's extremely expensive to get to that point. They've got these flight schools you can go to get the required ratings and multi-engine ratings and instrument ratings, and you're going to spend $100,000 easy. And it's just a tough deal. But there's a lot of people coming up through the ranks. You know, it's still an extremely rewarding career. I would recommend it for anybody.
Where do you think, Captain, is Wichita's aviation industry headed today?
Well, I think the industry here in Wichita has a great future. The 737 MAX thing has slowed things down, but that's going to be a thing of the past here pretty soon. And we've got quite a lot of industry here, you know, with Textron, which is also encompasses what used to be Beechcraft and Cessna here in town, and then we've got Spirit, and there's a lot of other machine shops and things around town that are supporting those bigger outfits. It bothers me that we're not turning out any big airplanes here in Wichita. I remember when they were building B-47s out here, and then they built B-52s. And Cessna was making all kinds of twin-engine airplanes, and along with the single-engine airplanes. Things have changed. The Cessna now, it's actually a lot bigger than what it was back in those days, because they're making all these different corporate jets. Cessna makes a wonderful line of corporate jets, and the corporate jets that Beechcraft was turning out, they're still coming off the line out there. And you know, of course, you've got the King Air and stuff. I think the industry is going to continue to grow in Wichita.
So you've retired. You retired several years ago. Mm-hmm. You still have airplanes. You fly. You enjoy your life. What is your goal today in life?
Man. Well, I'm kind of like everybody when they get in their mid-70s. I want to be successful financially and have the things that keep me going in life. Obviously, I'm not going to go to work for an airline anymore. Can't do that. But I could still, if I wanted to, I could still be a full-time instructor and things. I don't know, my goal in life is, I think, now to be successful, be happy, be secure in life, and be able to enjoy the rest of my life in aviation or whatever, and have a aviation type of an existence, or
Tell us something that people don't know about you.
Well, I'm a more spiritual person than some people would know. I go to a Central Christian Church, and I'm a greeter over there, and do a lot of Bible studies and things. And actually, the Lord is responsible for my career at Continental. That'd be another long story for a different day, but I'm becoming more and more involved in the church and what's going on in that part of my life.
When you were flying professionally, that is, flying the jets, did you pray before you took off and prayed before landing? Or how did God play a role in your life at that point?
Yeah, I prayed about it. I would like to say every time before I took off. I know I did at the airline, maybe not so much when I was flying corporate, but most of the time. And I always relied on the Lord's guidance for making proper decisions and being careful. Never been in an airplane, never scared anybody. I don't think I have. And as a matter of fact, I got an award from the FAA, Master Pilot's Award. And to get that, you've got to have flown for 50 years without a violation and without an accident. And I put together a group of us. We had a big celebration where there was the FAA had come down from Kansas City, and the local people and in the FAA, and there were 20 of us that all got our Master Pilot Award at that same time. Okay. And to my knowledge, that's the biggest crowd of pilots that have ever gone through at one time and got their Master Pilot Award, together.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's great. Matter of fact, that little pin right there is my 50-year award.
Okay. And that's from the FAA?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
On that note, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure having you.
It's been a pleasure being here. It's an honor.
And thank you for watching this week's edition of One-on-One. One-on-one@kpts.org is our email address. In the event you may have a question or comment. Until next time, I'm Victor Hogstrom, and I'll see you again soon.